9 figures gathered in the depths of the wood, plus 1, naked, bound, gagged and blindfolded. The 9 stood in a circle, their forms hidden beneath black robes, and their faces lost within the shadows of obscuring hoods. Within the centre of the circle, a small pile of rocks had been formed, with the hide of a goat laid out upon it, so that the skull of the beast rested atop the peak of the small formation. Fires burnt just out of view, so that a flickering darkness surrounded the scene, projected from unseen flames among the trees. Into the circle, the 10th person was dragged, and though he did not know the scene into which he was being forced, he nonetheless struggled for freedom. Having been thrown to the ground, he attempted to right himself, though with his ankles bound and his wrists tied behind his back, he could do little more than roll into a kneeling position. One of the hooded attendants stepped up behind him, and as the figure pulled a knife from out his robes, the others likewise produced matching blades of their own. Taking the postulate man by the shoulder, his captor leant down and cut the cords binding his feet together. Then, pushing him down so that his face was in the dirt, he also severed the ties of his wrists. The captive sprang into action, simultaneously pulling off the blindfold as he scrambled to his feet. For the first time he was able to see his abductors. They had him surrounded, but did nothing, waiting for him to make the first move. They were motionless, like statues, and for a moment he wondered if perhaps this could all be some kind of a prank. But he didn't feel like that. It felt too serious. He thought that he could try to make a run for it, to slip between them and disappear into the trees. It was the only option he could see. So, in an explosion of energy, he burst into a run. But they were ready, no, hoping, that he would do this. And as he attempted to pass out of the circle, the 2 flanking him stepped in front and stabbed quickly into his flesh with their blades. He cluttered into them, and they pushed him back into the circle, a look of shock and pain on his face. Gripping his wounds, he thoughtlessly stumbled in the opposite direction, trying to get away from those that had just attacked him. But those behind were equally ready, and they too stepped in with rapid stabs of their knives, pushing him back into the circle and towards another part of its outer edge, where again others were waiting to slide their blades into his flesh. In like fashion, he was shunted from one edge of the circle to the other, back and forth between the hooded assassins, as they each took it in turns to stab him as he reached them. Eventually, he could walk no more, and dropped to the ground, gripping at his blood-drenched body. The gag muffled his cries of agony, but those around him could hear the depths of his pain all the same. Finally, the victim slumped to the floor, falling face first into the dirt. 2 of the murderous cultists stepped forward and lifted the goatskin up into the air, while the others dragged the body of the fallen man onto the pile of rocks, letting his head rest atop it as the other's skull had done. Once he had been properly positioned, the hide was lowered down again to cover the body, and the goat skull placed upon the man's deceased head. Reforming the circle, the chanting began. Io shall aganan, Takabra sen mendes, dies tanibra conua coronatas, io nithkata, io shall aganan, Takabra sen mendes, dies tanibra conua coronatas, io nithkata, io shall aganan, Takabra sen mendes, dies tanibra conua coronatas, io nithkata, io shall aganan, Takabra sen mendes,
Dies libra conua coronatas. Io.
A silence fell over the forest, and neither man nor beast made a sound. All was still, and even the stars fell dark. Then there came a sound, far off in the trees, like the distant bleating of a sheep or goat. The unnerving noise broke in and out, but seemed closer each time it returned. Then, suddenly, the noise was among them, emanating from the centre of the circle. The bloody sacrifice twitched and spasmed as once more a semblance of life began to take hold, and with the hideous cracking of bones it shuddered and snapped forward, slowly standing with the skin draped over its back. But no more was this the form of man, for while the blood-soaked body of a man stood before them, its form was now topped with the head of a great black goat. It stood 7 feet tall, towering over those who had summoned it, and the thing outstretched its arms to present its majesty, while those around it dropped to their knees and gave worship. As the blasphemous terror bathed in their praise, each of the vile cultists raised a cup to the bleeding wounds of the beast, so that they may drink its blood in an act of unholy communion with their master. Each of them offered their continued allegiance, sealing their pact with a deep kiss of the creature's backside. Once their ties had been reaffirmed, the black goat's odious gaze fell upon them, and it bestowed to them the burning knowledge of the darkness, and the secret rites by which to call upon its foul gifts. And each of them writhed and cavorted under the hideous eye of the abomination, and they lost themselves in deprivations of flesh and violence. This is the way of that monstrous lord of the repellent, he who walks in sickness and sin, the despoiler, the beast of the unseen, the black goat.
Oh yeah.